Hi everyone, welcome back to the Looney Bin. My name is Looney, and today's Final Fantasy VII video, I want to talk about really the overall, belief of the remake project and how there's kind of a division between the community about, some people believing that the story is staying the same, some believing that the story will change because of the whole defying fate of destiny stuff. And I want to go over it, talk about it, give you my thoughts as well, and really try to dive into like why I don't think they're going to do any changes, why most of what they've been doing so far is, staying true to the OG. They're just expanding or changing small things and even sometimes reducing small things that maybe were not important enough to include, right? And this whole thing really isn't any different from the OG, and that it will all lead to eventually having children. And so many people think that, so many think that there's going to be a lot of changes happening. But from what we've seen so far, that's not necessarily the case. So let us really begin with this idea that, remake and what exactly is a remake. And so a lot of people seem to confuse remakes and remasters. Remakes are essentially taking something, could be a really old thing, and really updating it with modern technology, in this case video games, and bringing it to not only a older audience so that they could feel the nostalgia of these characters, of this story, and all of this game, but also to bring it into newer fans who may not have experienced the OG, or maybe were never interested in the OG, and give them new life to this franchise, to this game. And it really, really did a terrific job, in my personal opinion, in regards to that. But what do they mean when they say remake? A remake is not necessarily always one-to-one. One-to-one remakes don't always work out, which is why a lot of the remakes we are getting aren't always one-to-one. There's a lot of changes involved. And why is that? It's because when you're remaking something, you're trying to give the player, especially, players who have played the OG, a new way to experience the story that you love. And that is exactly what they did. They gave you a lot of nostalgia. They gave you a lot of the good stuff in Midgard. They gave you a lot of good stuff in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as well. And that really, really stayed true to the OG. But they're giving you it through a different viewpoint. They're giving it through with changes, with additions, with expansion of certain things, even subtraction of certain things that probably are better to be left off, because they want you to experience something new. Like, I understand this belief that a one-to-one remake would have been better for Final Fantasy VII, but at the same time, it's like, why would I play a remake if it's one-to-one if I could just play the OG? It doesn't really make sense, right? I understand the lore of like new higher graphics. I understand that. I get that. But at the same time, I want to experience something different. Yes, the technological advancement from 1997 to now will make you experience it very differently. But in terms of story, in terms of characters, why would that change much? Why would that be any new way to experience these games? It's why they made these changes. It's why they didn't do it one-to-one, because they wanted you to have a new experience. Now, why do some people not like that? I think it's because they really just wanted a one-to-one remake and didn't want to make any changes that sound a little weird, or like do something that puts fear into people in that they might change everything. And a lot of that comes from the last chapter of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where they talk about, destroying the arbiters of fate, meaning defying destiny and changing fate so that certain things don't happen in the future, such as what happens to Aerith in the story. And so many people, after Final Fantasy VII Remake, was beaten by players, thought that that's where they're headed, that they're going to be making these changes. There was some stuff with Aerith's character and her writing in Remake that made some people believe that. And when Rebirth came out, it turns out maybe they're not doing that. Maybe they're not making these huge changes, right? Because a lot of the major story beats in Rebirth stayed intact. it didn't really change much. They had like smaller changes. They had certain additions and expansions, such as the entire Gungaga chapter, which by far I think is one of the best chapters in the game, that really give more to not only the characters but the lore of the world of Final Fantasy VII. And it really allowed us to experience more of this wonderful world that we loved so much from the original game. Like, stuff like these type of expansions are just wonderful to have, especially if you're a huge fan of this franchise, right? But again, a lot of the major story beats were staying the same. The only really big changes that you can really think of, aside from what happens at the end, is the location of where you meet Sid, because you don't go to Rocket Town, right? Where you do meet Sid and then you fly off and escape from Shinra, and that's how you get Sid to join your party, as well as where you meet Yuffie, So it's like a lot of these story beats are the same. You beat the snake to get to, the Mythril Mines. You do the whole thing with Junon, right? You do the whole thing in Cosmo Canyon, which has a lot of changes to it, as well as some, kind of like issues in terms of like the what is it? How fast the stuff was going from like Nanaki's pass and all that stuff, and then straight to the Gi, right? For some reason I'm forgetting what the term is, but like you still do a lot of stuff in Cosmo Canyon the right way. Nibelheim is also slightly different, but most of it stays intact. You meet Vincent in the same place, and what happens in the Temple of Ancients is somewhat similar, and even what happens at the capital is similar. The only difference is that they're changing it in a certain way to give you a certain different viewpoint of what is happening, which is what they have stated when they did, Aerith's Dead Sea, where instead of viewing it from like a third party's perspective in terms of your perspective, they do it through Cloud's viewpoint, through Cloud's perspective. They wanted to change it into that angle, and you see all this really static and all this live stream stuff happening because you're viewing it through Cloud's mind that is just really breaking apart at this point. And I thought like that was an interesting take to have, because if you've played the OG, right, then you won't ever feel the same way about Aerith's death. It won't come to you as a surprise. The only reason why it kind of felt like a mystery or kind of a surprise is because they gave you this idea that there's a possibility they might change things. But they didn't, right? To me, my viewpoint of that whole thing is that Aerith is dead. She's dead just like in the OG, right? But now we're viewing it slightly different, and who knows where part 3 is going to come. But again, they're keeping the core of the story intact. They are not making these major changes, such as keeping Aerith alive, right? That a lot of fans seem to have not only feared, but also theorized as well, right? And a lot of the stuff from Rebirth that came out, a lot of people who make theories seem to come up with this idea that there's a multiverse theory or many other different theories, right? After Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, a lot of people tried thinking that this was a whole multiverse idea, that there are several different worlds, that exist in Final Fantasy VII now, where there might be a world where Aerith survives. But to me, especially after playing Rebirth, I don't think that is the case. But I did believe that theory at one point. But Rebirth kind of just drew that out of my mind, right? Because there's a line that Sephiroth says that talks about how the planet is the one creating these worlds, or like the planet is the one who has multiple worlds. If you are doing a multiverse aspect or multiverse idea, a lot of the times it will not just be one planet that's creating worlds. It is a universal thing, right? Where there's a possibility of a world where Genova doesn't exist or a Sephiroth doesn't exist, right? But it seems like all these worlds that we've been seeing and experiencing seem to have certain characters still there. There's always the possibility of a multiverse where Genova isn't there, but we haven't seen that at all, right? And to be fair, we don't necessarily see it at all anyway. But if it's coming from specifically planet, as Sephiroth says, then that means that it's not a multiverse. It will mean that it's coming from the live stream. I made videos, theories about what I think is happening, and that the worlds are being created from the dreams, memories of the people, and they're basically branches from the live stream that have been separated from the main one. And that's what's creating these worlds. And as each world dies, Sephiroth's influence grows within the live stream so that one day he can then be able to take it over. And similar to what he wanted to do with Advent Children is to corrupt the live stream so that he can fuse with the planet and become similar to his mother, Genova, and go on to the next planet. And I think that's where he's going with that, based on my viewpoint of where they're going with the story. At the same time, I understand why so many people wanted or believed in this multiverse theory, because that's literally what it kind of felt like. You know, these multiple worlds, this idea that Zack is alive all of a sudden. I get that. But everything that we have seen doesn't seem to really make that multiverse theory a thing anymore. And a lot of theory people are slowly starting to realize this. I've noticed, and I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying I'm happy that I'm kind of, getting the other people to see that as like a theory or something. But it's like a lot of people have for so long kept such a grasp on this multiverse theory that it's kind of weird seeing so many people changing tune. And the reason why I'm mentioning this isn't, to try to like brag or anything like that, because many different people have come up with the same theory about it all being the live stream. It's more so to do with the idea of getting theories wrong. And that is a major aspect with like how so many people seem to just not accept the loss that they were wrong about their theories and try to claim that this whole live stream thing is a brand new theory that they just came up with. I've seen it before. I've seen it happen, and it's quite shocking. But again, it's like, it's okay to be wrong about your theories. And for the most part that I have seen, a lot of CLOTI shippers were kind of right about what direction they are going in terms of like not changing the story beats, keeping the story beats intact, and doing all of this, and making sure that the story is the same as always. One of the biggest things I've seen a lot of people, and I made videos on this, is the changes that they do in part 3 is essentially the live stream sequence, where they will reveal Cloud didn't save Aerith in that sequence as a way to bring back the real Cloud in some form of capacity. The problem with that, as I've argued, is that that's not really healing or trying to find the real Cloud. That's just putting more stress onto not only Cloud, but what Tifa has to do as well in the live stream. And this other idea that so many people are going to get involved, to me, it's just, you're making something much more grand instead of keeping it simple. And I think if you try doing that, it makes it extremely complicated instead of making it very simple. If they continue this path, right, of keeping the story beats the same, it does not really make much sense to add newer people into the live stream sequence, because it just wouldn't help Cloud reveal his identity, right? You could add certain things, maybe certain memories that they experienced recently, like we see Stargazer Heights and some of Tifa's memories while she's in a live stream in the Gongaga chapter. Maybe you could add stuff from there, right? But adding new characters just seems like you are going down the same path as like, oh, they're going to change a lot of things in Rebirth like you felt in Remake, But if it continues to go the same route that not only Hamaguchi but Kitase has mentioned, that they're not changing the story, they're not going to make big changes to the major story beats such as the live stream sequence. So that's why I think making theories is always fun. Making theories is always great, but it's better to simplify it than making something grander, unless you understand or accept that it's just something that like you kind of hope to happen or like theorize could happen, but it's a little bit too much. and not force it onto other people, because forcing it onto people can make people really upset, and make them feel like you're insulting their intelligence, which I know is not the intent of people who make theories sometimes. But at the same time, it's like you're going against the pattern that they have been showing. Yes, I understand the whole thing with Zach. I understand the whole thing with different worlds and like trying to figure out like what exactly is happening, and that's part of the fun of theory making. This is not me telling you can't make theories like that. But at the same time, simple is much and always sometimes better than something grander. And a lot of people who come up with or talk about the lore of Final Fantasy VII, right, always seem to think that shippers don't know what they're talking about, that they're viewing through shipping goggles. And I understand that, because there's a lot of shippers out there that are very much a handful. I get that. You can kind of tell when a shipper is like that by just conversing with them, right? But you don't have to continue conversing with them. There are a lot of shippers, such as myself, who can discuss with you normal conversation with Final Fantasy VII without ever going into shipping goggle mode, right? Because shippers understand the character and the story and the lore really well. I'm not saying we understand it better than anyone else. I'm just saying we understand it, really well, because we try very hard to understand the characters, understand the story, so that it gives us hope that it leads towards our ship happening. And Final Fantasy VII, romance is a very important thing, because without, Cloud's feelings for Tifa as kids, he doesn't make the decision at all to become a soldier, because he wants to be strong enough so that he doesn't, ever see Tifa get hurt again after the Mount Nebo incident. So it's like, I get that shippers can be a little crazy. I get that. I get shippers have made a lot of communities really bad. I made several shipping videos on certain fandoms where they have gone pretty bad in a lot of shipping wars. But at the same time, it's okay. I feel like so many people don't want shippers at the table and just feel so disrespectful, and it's just like, give us a chance to at least talk, and then you can gauge whether or not we're actually sincere about our love for Final Fantasy VII or not, right? And I know there's a lot of shippers out there who are like mischaracterizing characters, or like really viewing scenes through shipping goggles because they only care about how it helps their ship. I get that. But with the way Kitase and Hamaguchi has been talking about the game, right, through these many interviews, a lot of it corresponds to what I have been saying and a lot of other CLOTI shippers have been saying. And it's really, really like, we're not trying to make you feel like your interpretation is wrong or your theories are wrong or anything like that. We're not trying to claim that we are right. We just want to be at least respected among the Final Fantasy community, because we also really care about the story. We love the story. We love the lore. We love the world. We love these characters. We just want to just be acknowledged, that what we've been saying, is what the devs have been regurgitating for so many months from all of these interviews, right? It just, it just feels a little kind of, it's like a feeling. I have no qualms with people coming up with theories or not wanting to talk to shippers, and like, depending on like what kind of shipper they are, because there's some crazy shippers out there. But like, just give us a chance. That's all we ask. But that's really where a lot of people seem to not understand in terms of the remake trilogy, because they want to come up with theories that are grand. They want to come up with theories that are just not as simple as them just following the OG. I get that, right? You will have people who are upset that they're not following the, or like keeping it 1-to-1, but you also have people who want changes to see, a much newer experience, such as keeping Aerith alive. But it's not what is being shown or given to you from what the story is telling you in the remake project. And I feel that until you realize that it's all leading up to having children, as Kitase has said, then you're going to continue making these grand theories that you hope is correct. And it's very well possible that, based on what we have seen so far with a lot of these interviews, they may be proven wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd rather be proven wrong at a theory, because it really gets me more excited, because, oh, the dev thought up something that's a lot more interesting than I could have ever come up with. And that makes me happy when that happens, because I want to be surprised. I don't want to know what happens, which is why I love that remakes are not one-to-one, but they make a lot of changes to give you a new experience. And that is why I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is doing just that. And so many people have been obsessed with this idea of defying fate, defying destiny, changing fate, that they're not looking at what is being presented to them in the story, which is mostly keeping the major story beats intact. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine. You're not going to get a one-to-one remake, or for any remake. You're going to want a new experience, and that is exactly what they're giving to you, because the OG story is still intact. And I think the way they're handling it is really good. You can criticize certain choices, such as, stuff like going from, this emotional dying scene all the way straight to some guy smacking his butt on a giant robot. Yeah, that is weird. I don't know why the pacing is so bad with that. But again, you can critique those moments, those pacing moments, but I think we have to acknowledge that they are not going to make any big changes that will completely change the story of Final Fantasy VII. And it has been proven with not only Remake, but also Rebirth. And more than likely, Part 3 will stay the same, same story beats, with additions, some subtractions, right? And expansion of many moments in Part 3 that I am personally excited about, specifically the live stream sequence. And I think a lot more people, based off what Hamaguchi and Kitase have been saying in these recent interviews, are slowly realizing that, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. It's all going to lead up to Advent Children in one way or another. And thus, they are keeping the core of the OG story intact. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about and rant about this. I wasn't trying to make you feel like your interpretation is wrong or that I know better than you. I don't. Trust me. I've seen people talk about Final Fantasy VII. There's stuff that they talk about that I'm like, oh, I did not know that. Even in my most recent stream, I was corrected about something that I thought I remember correctly from the OG. And I admitted that I was wrong, and that's perfectly fine. And that's really how we can communicate and get better at making these theories, making these videos, these Reddit posts. And I think that is more valuable than trying to prove or trying to, claim that everyone, or claim that I am better than you at understanding the story and the lore. It's just bizarre way of thinking. We all should communicate, even with shippers, right? That we all love the same story and want to create new ideas so that we can get a better understanding and appreciate more of the wonderful world that is Final Fantasy VII. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night or day or afternoon, and I'll see you guys next time.